Welcome. This is Stephen Lee, and this is life and the living of it. On this podcast, I thought I would bring all of my pottery stories together. The encounters, the frustrations, the celebrations, the craft shows, the marketing, but mostly the enjoyment. It all started when I had the opportunity to take an elective in college called ceramics. I thought I'd go in there and I'd throw on the wheel, and hey, that would be all they wrote. Well, the first semester of ceramics was hand building, and only in the second semester could we use the kick wheels to do our pottery. Let me mention a little about hand building. Hand building and I sort of have a love-hate relationship. If you read any book on hand building, it'll say things like, this is how you join sheets of clay together, which are called slabs. This is how you connect coils together. And in the books, they have wonderful illustrations of these marvelous little pots, or these brilliantly organic shapes, or these cute little dishes that you can make hand building. Yes, none of those occurred for me in hand building. For example, I would roll out my slab with a slab roller, and I would score the edges, and then I'd put slurry, which is liquid clay, on it, and I'd join the two slabs together. And theoretically, this creates a seal that, even through firing, keeps the two pieces together. Guess how many times my pieces didn't stay together in the kiln? Or like coil rolling, I would roll out coils and I'd try to make a pot with them, and I'd smooth them with my thumbs and fingers. But when I looked at my finished product of the pot, it didn't look like a cute little teapot. No, it looked like a drug-induced fever dream of a teapot. Yeah, hand building really wasn't my friend. So one day I just got fed up and I took a broomstick and I detached it from the head, and I put the broomstick in the middle of my desk, and I covered it with clay, and this was like 4 foot tall, and I made projections of clay out of it like a clay tree. And I knew, of course, I couldn't fire it. It was too big for the kiln. But I was just going to create something ugly on purpose. But no, that my teacher liked. It's like, why do you like this ugly tree clay thing? His words, it shows a lot of ambition. It shows that you're in the organic mindset. Well, thanks. The second semester was so much better. We had these huge kick wheels that had bricks in the flywheel, and you'd sit down on them and you'd kick with your feet until the flywheel was going fairly quickly. And then you'd get your little ball of clay and whack it against the wheel head, and you'd start trying to center it. I think this is where the fact that he was a golf coach who was teaching ceramics kind of did him a disservice. Because when we all ask, how do we center? How do we know that it's centered? He would say, you will feel it. It will feel natural. I can imagine him saying the exact same words to his golf students about their golf swing. Well, here I was unnaturally trying to feel natural while throwing a ball of clay on a kick wheel after classes on a Saturday morning. Trust me, it never felt natural. I would start with a 5-pound ball of clay and end up with a 6-ounce ball of clay, and when it got small enough, I could finally center it. So instead of creating all the vases and plates and bowls that I imagined in my mind, I created tiny shot glasses and tiny teacups without handles, and a tiny vase in which you could probably place one dandelion. And by the way, yeah, it never felt natural. Fast forward to 2002, 10 years later. I was going through some serious health conditions. I was having problems with anxiety and depression. And so my mom thought it was a good idea to sign me up for a pottery class. A pottery class that she and I would take together. And I got a little excited. Hey, I could try the wheel again. Maybe I could even try an electric wheel. Oh, wow. And guess what the first class was about? Hand building. Oh, my gosh. And so there I was, using coils, rolls, slabs, slip, always with my eye to the 2 different electric wheels that were in his studio. So after about the 7th or 8th class, I asked him, hey, can I just try my hand at the wheel? And he gave me this look like, yeah, go ahead and go for it, kid. Let's see what you can do. I say kid because back then he was already 45 years older than I was. And so, for the next 3 weeks, with whatever spare time I could get, I would drive over to his studio and get on the wheel and try to center that first ball of clay. Now picture this. This was in August. He has no air conditioning. It's an open plan studio. It's 103 inside. And so here I was on a Sunday afternoon trying to center this clay, which I've been trying to center, it seemed like for 1,000 times in 1,000 days, with sweat pouring off my head, splashing the clay, my arms tired, my shoulders sore, my back creaking. And I remember saying, God, if this doesn't center this time, that's it. I'm giving up. I'm calling it a day. I will never come back to pottery again. And so in all of my frustration and exhaustion, the clay decides to center for the first time. And I looked around and nobody was there for me to celebrate with. It's like, hello, look at this, look, hey. But then I thought, well, hold on, maybe it's a fluke. And I took the next ball of prepared clay and I smashed it down on the wheelhead. And that one centered too. And by then I was hooked. I started creating bowls and plates and cups and mugs and vases and cylinders. I was in there so much that my teacher said, well, you have to start buying your own clay. You're using way too much of mine. And finally, I got together enough money to buy my own wheel. I bought a used kiln. I bought some clay, some supplies. I turned the back room of my first house into a studio. I started mixing my own glazes, buying my own ingredients. And before you knew it, I was whipping out pieces. Was I good? Now I was living on 1 acre, and part of that 1 acre was a pond. And if you dug down into that pond, you would find probably hundreds of pieces that were the most ugly things you've seen in your life. Archaeologists may one day dig up all of those terrible pots, terrible creations that I threw in my pond. And they would probably say this is representative of the tacky era in the 21st century. I had a lot of failures, but I had enough successes that I started going to shows to sell my pottery. I remember my first show. I paid for this 10 by 10 foot space in front of an elementary school. And for hours, I attempted to persuade mothers and fathers and children to buy my pots. I realized quickly I was terrible at self-promotion. I also realized it took a long time to set up my booth and a long time to tear it down. Now, I had made this ugly teapot that was kind of a phallic symbol. Had you seen the teapot, you would know exactly what I was talking about. No, it was not on purpose. And it was this ugly pink color because my glaze formulation didn't quite turn out the way I wanted it to. So it was this kind of ugly, hideous, spotted, pink, phallic symbol teapot. Now with that in mind, my mom had to convince me to take it to the show and try to sell it. I was embarrassed by it. I fought her on it, but you know moms. And so here was this pink, spotted, ugly, diseased-looking, phallic symbol teapot. And it sold in the first 5 minutes. And I remember the lady who bought it saying, I have been looking for a teapot just like this. Okay, glad you found it. That'll be $35, thank you. Now, I had done several other shows, and I found that people who really pushed their product on people didn't get very many customers. But if people could handle your product, and especially those one-off pieces, if you could tell the customer what it was, they're much more likely to sell. I would encourage people to pick up the pottery pieces and feel them and hold them. I remember I created one piece that I didn't know what it was. I just created it, right? It wasn't quite a bottle, and it wasn't quite a dish, and it wasn't quite a bowl. It had two openings, one slightly smaller than the other. Kind of looked like an exploded macaroni noodle. And someone said, "Oh, this is great. What is it?" I said, "That's a nut dispenser." And they're like, "Oh, yeah. I need a nut dispenser. Yeah, how much is it?" And there goes the, quote, nut dispenser. I enjoyed the shows, but what I enjoyed more was when I got to teach people on the wheel. Because while I had a very famous artist as a pottery teacher, he was not a good teacher. He was a good artist. He was very hands-off and technical. So I wanted to be very hands-on and passionate. So over a year and a half, I had about 12 students. And they would come out to my mom's barn out in the country, because by then I was out of my first house, and my studio had to move to my mom's barn. And with wheel throwing, I really did have a hands-on approach. I wanted the students to feel with their hands exactly how much pressure, in what direction, how to hold their body, how to hold their shoulders, their arms, their hands, to help build the muscle memory of how to center and raise and throw a pot. The exact opposite of how I was taught. So I would ask them, can I put my hands on your hands? And I would help them center a pot so they could feel what centering actually felt like. And with most of them on the first day, first class, they were centering pots on their own. I don't know if you have ever been a teacher or taught a skill to someone, but there is just a lot of joy in having your students get it. Very proud moments. Well, I remember one girl, Alex, she was probably 11 years old. She brought her grandmother, Jane, with her. And at one point, Alex asked Jane if she wanted to try her throwing on the wheel. And then she looked at me to see if that was okay, and I said, sure. And I asked if I could place my hands on hers. Now, Jane became very reticent. She pulled her hands closer to her body. She looked a little frightened. And I was kind of at a loss because this was how I taught. I could teach her with words, but words wouldn't allow her to feel what the clay was doing. And this is when Alex piped up, "Hey, I can show you with my hands, Grandma." To which she agreed. So I modified my technique a bit. I put my hands on Alex's hands as Alex put her hands on her grandmother's hands. So for that hour, I showed Alex with my hands on hers and her hands on her grandmother's how to center the clay. I asked her to remember the pressure, the feeling, the position, everything her hands were feeling. And then I took my hands off, and I had Alex directly teach Jane. And you know what? Alex did a better job than I did. Jane got to center her first pot. It centered. And Alex said, "You did it, Grandma." That was a good day. Now, when my heart started failing and my health became worse, I had to give up pottery. I sold my studio equipment, sold my wheel. I sold it to another potter, though. Sold whatever clay I had left. Gave my pottery books away to the same other potter. Sold my kiln to another potter. And now, 10 years later than that, I kind of miss it. I do. And there may come a time that I rent out some studio space, I buy some clay, I put down my ball of clay on a wheel, and I'll say, what are we going to create today? And this is life and the living of it.